My husband, Mark, comes from a family so vast and interconnected, it feels less like a family and more like a small, boisterous village. And their hospitality? Legendary. Which would be wonderful if Mark actually participated in the work of hosting. He's fantastic at the abstract concept of welcoming them, but when it comes to the cooking, the cleaning before and after, the endless serving of guests, that's all on me. And frankly, I'm done. I remember the first time I truly grasped the scale of his family. It was when we were planning our wedding 5 years ago. Just from Mark's side, there were 50, maybe 60 people. And that same sprawling group shows up for birthdays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, every holiday you can imagine. I'll confess, even after half a decade of marriage, I still can't keep all of their names straight. For the record, Mark is as American as apple pie, born and raised in a small town in Ohio, though his family roots trace back to Eastern Europe generations ago, which explains some of their unique traditions. They're good people, truly. But first, they are loud. Not angry loud, just loud. It's like they don't know how to converse below a certain decibel. Second, they don't do day trips. If they're coming, it's a minimum of a week-long stay. And third, there's this unspoken rule that guests are to be pampered, catered to, and entertained from every angle. Visiting them is like a mini vacation. You're fed, watered, amused, and indulged. But the flip side is, you're expected to reciprocate in kind. And I'm exhausted. Just last month, 5 of them descended upon our cozy 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. Mark announced this happy event a week in advance, and my brain immediately went into Tetris mode, figuring out who would sleep where. Then began the frantic cleaning spree. It had to be spotless, because inevitably, someone would end up on the living room floor. The day before they arrived, I had to rush to the grocery store, the only thing Mark helps with, bless his heart, and cook enough food for an army, at least for the first day. And once they arrived, my life became a Groundhog Day loop. Feed them, wash dishes, cook, clean, take them sightseeing, feed them, wash dishes, cook, put them to bed, do laundry. For an entire week. All while I'm still working my full-time job as a graphic designer. If this was a once-a-year ordeal, I could take a vacation day or two and survive, but it's almost every month. And through it all, Mark offers zero help. At most, he'll clear the table and go for groceries. The rest of the time, he's catching up with his relatives whom he hasn't seen in, well, a few weeks. Meanwhile, I'm running around like a frantic squirrel on a wheel. By the end of their visit, my hands are literally shaking from exhaustion. But you can't show them you're unhappy with their visit, can you? They were invited, after all. Why would I offend these perfectly nice people? I've tried talking to Mark. Told him I'm tired, that I need help, that I can't handle it all. He just blinks at me as if he's hearing it for the first time. Why didn't you ask for help, is his go-to question. He conveniently forgets that I have asked more than once, more than twice. Their response was always, yeah, in a minute, followed by zero action. So I laid down an ultimatum. He helps or no more guests. He sulked, accusing me of giving him ultimatums. They're my family. Why can't I invite them over? Are you trying to drive a wedge between me and my relatives? It's how we do things. But I don't want to do things this way anymore. They are, almost all of them, lovely people once you get used to their loudness and their expectation of being waited on hand and foot. But I'm tired of being Cinderella, waiting for a fairy godmother who never shows up, whose carriage never turns into a pumpkin. I'm so utterly drained. I'm actually contemplating divorce over something so seemingly trivial. But it's not trivial. It's my life, and I'm drowning. This isn't just about dirty dishes or extra laundry. It's about a fundamental disrespect for my time, my energy, and my well-being. It's about feeling invisible in my own home, a servant in my own marriage. The resentment has been building, a slow, toxic tide, threatening to engulf everything we built. And then the unthinkable happened. A secret buried deep within Mark's family began to surface, threatening to shatter not just our marriage, but my entire understanding of who he was and what I was willing to endure. It started subtly, A hushed conversation I overheard, a fleeting look of panic in Mark's eyes when a distant cousin mentioned something about the incident and the girl. My blood ran cold. I pressed my ear closer to the thin wall, straining to hear. The words were fragmented, hushed, but enough to paint a terrifying picture. A young woman, a difficult decision, and a family's desperate attempt to control the narrative. It wasn't just about Mark's overbearing relatives anymore. It was about a secret, a dark shadow that had been lurking beneath the surface of his seemingly perfect family, and now it was reaching out to ensnare me. The first whisper of the secret came during one of those interminable family gatherings. Aunt Carol, Mark's mother's sister, a woman whose smile never quite reached her eyes, was recounting old family anecdotes. She paused, her gaze flicking to Mark, then to me, a strange mix of pity and warning in her expression. "Remember little Sarah?" she'd said, her voice dropping conspiratorially. "Such a bright girl. A real shame what happened." Mark had immediately cut her off, a sharp, almost violent, "Aunt Carol, please." "Not now." The abruptness of his tone, the sudden tension in the room, was palpable. Everyone shifted uncomfortably, and the conversation quickly veered to safer topics. But the name, Sarah, lingered in my mind like a phantom. Later that night, after everyone had finally left, and I was, as usual, scrubbing pots and pans, I brought it up. "Who's Sarah, Mark? And what happened to her?" He stiffened, his back to me as he put away the last of the serving dishes. "Nobody, Olivia. Just an old family friend. She moved away years ago." His voice was too casual, too dismissive. I knew he was lying. The way his shoulders hunched, the way he avoided my gaze, these were the tells I learned to recognize over 5 years of marriage. It didn't sound like just an old family friend, Mark. Aunt Carol looked sad. "And you looked furious." He sighed, turning to face me, his expression carefully neutral. "It's a long story, Liv. An old, painful story. It has nothing to do with us, but it did. I felt it in my gut. The way his family operated, their fierce loyalty, their almost suffocating embrace of tradition, it all suddenly felt less charming and more sinister. The constant demands on my time, the expectation of my servitude, now seemed like a distraction, a way to keep me too busy, too exhausted, to notice the cracks in their perfect facade. I started paying closer attention. Little things. A framed photo on his mother's mantelpiece, tucked behind a larger, more prominent one, showing a young woman with Mark's eyes, but a softer, more ethereal quality. I'd never noticed it before. When I asked his mother, Eleanor, about it, she'd simply said, "Oh, that's a distant cousin. She passed away young." Another lie. The photo was too recent, the girl too vibrant to be a distant memory. And the way Eleanor's hand had trembled as she picked up a teacup immediately after, a telltale sign of distress. My research began subtly. I started with old yearbooks from Mark's high school, ostensibly looking for pictures of him. I found a Sarah Miller, a year younger than Mark, with the same striking eyes as the girl in the photo. She was listed as a talented artist, active in the drama club. No mention of her after graduation. I tried searching online, but Sarah Miller was too common. I needed more. I needed a connection to Mark's family, something unique. I remember Aunt Carol's full name, Carol Jenkins. A quick search revealed her maiden name was Petrov. Mark's family name. Bingo. I started cross-referencing. Sarah Miller, Petrov family. Nothing. It was like she'd been erased. The more I dug, the more frustrated I became. It was like hitting a brick wall. Every mention of her was vague. Every family member I subtly questioned either clammed up or gave me the same rehearsed line about a distant cousin who moved away. The silence was deafening and only fueled my suspicion. This wasn't just a painful memory, it was a deliberate cover-up. What could be so terrible that an entire family would conspire to erase someone from their history? My mind raced through possibilities: a scandal, a crime, a forbidden love. Each thought more unsettling than the last. The weight of their expectations, the endless stream of guests, the constant demands on my time, it all began to feel like a cage, designed to keep me from looking too closely, from asking too many questions. One evening, while Mark was out with his father, I found myself alone in their sprawling suburban home, helping Eleanor organize old photo albums. She'd asked me to, a rare moment of quiet intimacy between us. As I flipped through the brittle pages, a loose photograph slipped out. It was a picture of a younger Eleanor, radiant and smiling, standing next to a teenage girl who was unmistakably Sarah. But what caught my eye was the date on the back, just 2 years before Mark and I met. And Sarah was visibly pregnant. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't a distant cousin who passed away young. This was something far more immediate, far more devastating. I quickly slipped the photo into my pocket, my mind reeling. The pieces were starting to click into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. That night, I confronted Mark, the photo clutched in my hand. His face, usually so open and kind, contorted into a mask of shock and then, chillingly, anger. "Where did you get that?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "It doesn't matter where I got it, Mark. What matters is what it means. Who is Sarah? And why is she pregnant in this picture? Why did your mother lie to me?" The questions tumbled out, years of suppressed frustration and growing suspicion finally breaking free. He tried to snatch the photo, but I held it tight. "Tell me, Mark. Tell me everything." He finally broke, collapsing onto the sofa, his head in his hands. The story that spilled out was a tangled web of family secrets, shame, and control. Sarah wasn't just a cousin, she was Mark's younger sister. And the baby? It was hers. A teenage pregnancy, a scandal that threatened to tarnish the Petrov family's pristine reputation in their tight-knit community. Eleanor, a woman obsessed with appearances, had orchestrated a plan. Sarah was sent away ostensibly to a prestigious art boarding school in another state, but in reality to a secluded home for unwed mothers. The family had decided, without Sarah's full consent, that the baby would be given up for adoption. Sarah, young and vulnerable, had been pressured, manipulated, and ultimately forced into a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She had resisted, pleaded, but the family's will was absolute. They had convinced her it was for her own good, for the good of the family, for the good of the baby. They had even gone so far as to tell her that if she didn't comply, they would disown her, cut off all ties, and ensure she would never see her child again. The emotional blackmail had been relentless. Mark had been a silent accomplice, a terrified teenager caught between his sister's anguish and his parents' unwavering authority. He'd loved Sarah fiercely, but his fear of his parents, his ingrained respect for family tradition, had paralyzed him. He'd watched, helpless, as his sister was stripped of her agency, her choices, her future. After the baby was born and adopted, Sarah had returned, a ghost of her former self. She'd never truly recovered, eventually leaving home and cutting off contact with most of the family, unable to forgive them or herself. The official story was that she'd gone off to pursue her art career, a convenient lie that allowed the family to maintain their facade. The photo I held was a relic of a past they desperately wanted to bury, a testament to a decision that had broken a young woman's spirit and fractured a family from within. My world tilted on its axis. The endless family gatherings, the suffocating hospitality, the constant need for control, it all made a horrifying kind of sense now. It wasn't just about tradition, it was about maintaining a carefully constructed image, about burying anything that threatened their carefully curated narrative. And I, Olivia, had been unwittingly drawn into this web of deceit, a new pawn in their game of appearances. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Mark, my husband, the man I loved, had known about this. He had kept this secret from me for 5 years. He had allowed me to be absorbed into this family, knowing the darkness that lay beneath. The betrayal was a bitter taste in my mouth. How could I trust him? How could I ever look at his family the same way again? The foundation of our marriage, built on what I thought was honesty and mutual respect, crumbled beneath my feet. This wasn't just a family secret, it was a wound, festering and toxic, and I was now standing directly in its path. The air in our apartment felt thick with unspoken truths, the silence between us screaming louder than any argument. I looked at Mark, truly looked at him, and saw a stranger, a man complicit in a profound injustice. The question wasn't just about Sarah anymore, it was about us. Could our love survive this devastating revelation? Could I ever forgive him for his silence, for his complicity? The answer felt like a chasm opening up between us, wide and terrifying. It's strange how these dark family secrets connect us. If this story is getting under your skin, subscribe for more real family exposés. The weight of this secret, the sheer audacity of the family's actions, pressed down on me. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. This wasn't just a story I was hearing. It was a story I was now a part of, a silent witness to a past injustice that still echoed in the present. The casual way they had dismissed Sarah, the ease with which they had erased her child, spoke volumes about their capacity for control and their ruthless pursuit of reputation. And Mark, my husband, had been a part of it. He had stood by and watched, then buried the truth for years. The man I married, the man I thought I knew, was suddenly a stranger, shrouded in the shadows of his family's past. The betrayal was a sharp, searing pain, far worse than any exhaustion from endless hosting. This was a betrayal of trust, of intimacy, of the very foundation of our relationship. I felt a profound sense of isolation, surrounded by a family that valued appearances over truth, control over compassion, and I was trapped, caught in the suffocating embrace of their secrets, unsure if I could ever break free. The question of what to do next loomed large, a terrifying precipice at the edge of my new reality. Do I expose them? Do I confront them? Or do I, like Mark, become another silent accomplice, another keeper of their dark truths? The thought alone made me sick to my stomach. This was no longer about dirty dishes. It was about morality, about justice, about the very soul of my marriage. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that my life would never be the same. The revelation about Sarah and her child hung heavy in the air between Mark and me. Our apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battlefield. He tried to explain, to justify his silence, citing fear, family pressure, and the sheer weight of expectation. I was just a kid, Liv, he'd pleaded, his eyes red-rimmed. What could I do? They made it clear if I spoke up, I'd be next. They'd cut me off, too. His words, though tinged with genuine remorse, did little to soothe the burning anger in my chest. I saw not a scared teenager, but a man who had chosen complicity over courage, convenience over conscience. And that choice had allowed a young woman to be crushed by the very people who should have protected her. My relationship with Mark became a tightrope walk over a canyon of unspoken accusations. Every family dinner, every forced smile from Eleanor, every boisterous laugh from an uncle felt like a fresh wound. I saw through their facade now, the carefully constructed image of a loving, supportive family. It was a prison, built on secrets and enforced by emotional blackmail. I started to resent their visits even more, not just for the physical labor they demanded, but for the psychological toll. Each arrival was a reminder of Sarah, a ghost haunting our living room, a silent accusation against Mark and his family. I couldn't let it go. The injustice gnawed at me. Sarah, wherever she was, deserved better. Her child, somewhere out there, deserved to know their mother. I began to search again, this time with a clearer purpose. I wasn't just looking for a name, I was looking for a life. I started with adoption agencies in the state where Sarah had been sent. It was a long shot, a needle in a haystack, but I was desperate. I spent hours online, poring over forums for adoptees and birth parents, trying to find any thread, any clue. Mark, sensing my renewed determination, grew increasingly agitated. He begged me to stop, to let sleeping dogs lie. "You're going to destroy everything, Olivia," he'd warned, his voice laced with desperation. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into." But his warnings only strengthened my resolve. I had to know. One evening, while Mark was at his weekly poker game, I stumbled upon an old, obscure online art gallery. It featured student work from a small, private art college in rural Vermont, the very college Sarah was supposedly attending when she was sent away. And there, among the digital canvases, was a series of haunting self-portraits. The artist's name, Sarah Miller. The eyes were unmistakable. They were older now, filled with a profound sadness, but still the same striking eyes from the photograph. The descriptions accompanying the art were cryptic, filled with metaphors of loss, forced choices, and hidden truths. One particularly poignant piece, titled "Empty Cradle," depicted a hollowed-out nest, a single, withered flower lying within. It was a gut punch. This was her. She was alive, and she was still painting her pain. I found a contact email for the gallery. I wrote to the curator, explaining my connection to Sarah's family, carefully omitting the more scandalous details. I simply stated I was trying to reconnect with an old friend and was worried about her. To my surprise, the curator responded. Sarah, she wrote, had been a brilliant but troubled student. She had left the college abruptly years ago, never completing her degree. The curator provided a forwarding address, a small art commune in upstate New York, a glimmer of hope, a fragile thread in the darkness. I didn't tell Mark. I couldn't. His fear was too palpable, his loyalty to his family's secrets too strong. I knew he would try to stop me. So one Saturday, under the guise of visiting a friend, I drove the 4 hours upstate. The commune was nestled deep in the woods, a collection of rustic cabins and studios. I found Sarah in a small, cluttered studio, her hands stained with paint, her face etched with a weariness that belied her age. She looked up as I entered, her eyes, those familiar, haunted eyes, widening in surprise. "Olivia?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. She knew who I was. Mark must have spoken of me. Our conversation was halting at first, filled with years of unspoken pain. I told her everything I knew, everything Mark had confessed. She listened, her gaze fixed on a half-finished canvas, a storm brewing in her eyes. When I finished, she finally spoke, her voice raw with emotion. "They told me it was for the best," she said, her words a bitter echo of Mark's own justifications. "They told me I was too young, too naive, that I couldn't give a child the life it deserved. They said they'd disown me, that I'd be alone." She paused, a tear tracing a path through the paint on her cheek. But the worst part, Olivia, the absolute worst part, was that they told me the baby was a boy. A healthy, beautiful boy. And that he was adopted by a wonderful family, a family who would give him everything I couldn't. And then came the second, more devastating twist. "But it was a lie, Olivia," she continued, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and profound grief. "All of it. A lie." She stood up, walked to a dusty bookshelf, and pulled out a worn photo album. She opened it to a page, and there, staring back at me, was a picture of a baby girl. A tiny, fragile infant, wrapped in a pink blanket. "My daughter," Sarah whispered, her fingers tracing the image. Her name was Lily, and she wasn't adopted. She died 2 weeks after she was born. Complications. They never told me. They just told me she was adopted. They wanted me to believe she was alive, happy somewhere else. It was easier for them, less messy, less guilt. The air left my lungs in a rush. A baby girl. Lily, dead, not adopted. The family hadn't just coerced Sarah into giving up her child. They had lied about the child's very existence, about her death. The cruelty was unfathomable. Eleanor, the matriarch, the woman who had always presented herself as the epitome of grace and compassion, was capable of such calculated deception. My mind reeled. This wasn't just about protecting a reputation. This was about a cold, ruthless manipulation of a young woman's grief. Mark's silence, his fear, suddenly seemed even more reprehensible. He had known about this, too. He had known his sister's child had died, and he'd allowed her to believe her baby was alive, thriving with another family. The depth of their deception was a black hole, threatening to swallow me whole. The image of the tiny pink-wrapped infant burned into my mind. Lily. A life extinguished, a truth buried, all for the sake of appearances. The family's web of lies was far more intricate, far more sinister than I had ever imagined. I felt a surge of protectiveness for Sarah, a fierce anger at the injustice she had suffered. This wasn't just a family secret, it was a crime against humanity, a violation of a mother's most fundamental right to grieve her child. And I was no longer just an observer. I was a participant, an unwilling accomplice to their monstrous deception. The path forward was murky, fraught with danger, but one thing was clear: I could not, would not remain silent. The truth, however painful, had to come out. This moment shattered everything I knew. If you're feeling this shock too, hit like it helps uncover more hidden family truths. The weight of Sarah's revelation pressed down on me, a suffocating blanket of grief and outrage. Lily, a name whispered into the void, a life erased by a family's desperate need for control. I looked at Sarah, her face a canvas of sorrow, and felt a profound connection to her pain. We were both victims of this family's twisted sense of loyalty, their willingness to sacrifice individual happiness for the sake of their collective image. My own struggles with Mark's family, the endless hosting, the feeling of being invisible now seemed trivial in comparison to Sarah's profound loss. But they were connected. The same controlling hand that dictated my domestic life had also orchestrated Sarah's tragedy. The realization solidified my resolve. I couldn't just walk away. I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard. The truth demanded to be unearthed, not just for Sarah, but for every unspoken victim of this family's tyranny. The thought of confronting Eleanor, of tearing down her carefully constructed facade, filled me with a terrifying mix of dread and exhilaration. This was no longer just about my marriage. It was about justice. It was about giving a voice to the voiceless, about honoring the memory of a child whose existence had been denied. The battle lines were drawn, and I knew with a chilling certainty that I was about to ignite a firestorm that would consume everything in its path. There was no turning back. The secrets had festered for too long, and now they were about to explode. My return from Sarah's commune was a blur of righteous fury and a chilling resolve. The quiet drive back to Brooklyn was filled with the echoes of Sarah's pain. The image of Lily's tiny face burned into my mind. I walked into our apartment, and the sight of Mark, casually watching TV, felt like a betrayal. He looked up, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes, sensing the shift in my demeanor. "Where have you been?" he asked, his voice attempting a casual tone that didn't quite land. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked straight to her bedroom, pulled out the worn photo of Sarah and Lily, and laid it on the coffee table in front of him. His eyes widened, a dawning horror spreading across his face. "I went to see Sarah," I stated, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "She told me everything. About Lily. About the lie." Mark's face drained of color. He tried to speak, but no words came out. "You knew, didn't you?" I pressed, my voice rising now, the carefully constructed calm shattering. You knew her baby died, and you let her believe she was adopted. You let your family destroy her, Mark. And you helped them. He flinched, recoiling as if I had struck him. It wasn't like that, Liv. I was scared. They threatened me. His excuses, once perhaps understandable, now sounded hollow, pathetic. Scared? Scared of what, Mark? Losing your inheritance? Losing their approval? While your sister lost her child, her truth, her sanity? The argument that followed was brutal, a raw, visceral tearing apart of everything we had built. Years of unspoken resentments, of my feeling invisible and taken for granted, merged with the fresh wound of his complicity in Sarah's tragedy. He accused me of meddling, of trying to destroy his family. I accused him of cowardice, of prioritizing appearances over humanity. The words were weapons, each one designed to inflict maximum damage. By the end of the night, the apartment was silent again, but this time, it was the silence of a war zone, littered with emotional debris. He slept on the couch. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the image of Lily's face superimposed over every memory of Mark's family, tainting them all. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't stay silent. Not anymore. I called Sarah. I'm going to expose them, I told her, my voice firm. All of it. The lies, the manipulation, what they did to you, what they did to Lily. There was a long pause on the other end. Olivia, you don't understand, Sarah finally said, her voice trembling. They're powerful. They'll destroy you. They've already destroyed enough, I countered. And I'm not letting them get away with it. Sarah, after much hesitation, agreed to help, but only if her identity remained protected. She would provide me with details, dates, names, anything that could corroborate my story, but she couldn't face them directly. I understood. Her wounds were still too fresh. My plan began to take shape. I started documenting everything, the dates of family visits, the endless demands, Mark's evasiveness, the details Sarah provided. I even found old emails between Eleanor and a lawyer discussing discreet arrangements and reputation management. It was all circumstantial, but together it painted a damning picture. I decided to write an anonymous expose, a blog post that would go viral, forcing the truth into the open. I would use my skills as a graphic designer to create compelling visuals to make the story undeniable. But then, the third twist. A week later, a registered letter arrived. It was from a law firm, a very prestigious one, representing Eleanor Petrov. It was a cease and desist letter accusing me of defamation, of attempting to extort money from the family, and threatening legal action if I continued to harass them or spread falsehoods. It also contained a chilling clause, a prenuptial agreement signed by Mark and me, buried deep within the legal jargon of our marriage certificate that I had completely forgotten about. It stipulated that in the event of a divorce, any public disclosure of family matters deemed detrimental to the Petrov name would result in me forfeiting all marital assets, including our apartment, and potentially facing severe financial penalties. It was a legal trap, meticulously laid, designed to ensure my silence. Mark, my husband, had known about this too. He had signed it, allowed me to sign it, knowing full well the power it gave his family over me. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about a family secret. It was about control, absolute and total. They had anticipated this, had planned for it. Eleanor, the seemingly benevolent matriarch, was a master manipulator, a strategist who had ensured her family's secrets would remain buried, no matter the cost. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I was trapped. Legally, financially, emotionally. My desire for justice, for Sarah, for Lily, was now pitted against my own survival. If I spoke out, I would lose everything. My home, my financial security, my future. The very thought of being homeless, penniless, all for a truth that might never truly see the light of day was terrifying. The Petrovs had played a long game, and I had walked right into their snare. I confronted Mark again, the legal document shaking in my hand. "You knew about this, didn't you?" I whispered, my voice raw with a new kind of pain, the pain of utter betrayal. "You let me sign this. You let your mother set me up." He looked away, his silence a confession. "It was a condition of the marriage, Liv," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "They said if I didn't get you to sign it, they wouldn't approve of our marriage. They would cut me off." The excuses once again poured out, but this time they felt even more hollow. He had chosen his family's money, their approval over my trust, my safety, my future. The man I loved, the man I had built a life with, was a stranger, a puppet in his family's elaborate scheme. The chasm between us was now an unbridgeable canyon. My heart, once filled with love and hope, was now a hollowed-out shell, echoing with the sound of shattered trust. I still lie awake wondering, what would you have done when they tried to control your body? Share your truth in the comments. Subscribe for more shocking family revelations. The weight of this new revelation, the sheer depth of the Petrov family's machinations, was almost unbearable. They hadn't just buried a secret, they had built an entire fortress of legal and emotional traps to protect it. And Mark, my husband, had been an active participant in building that fortress around me. The betrayal was complete, absolute. My anger, once a burning fire, now felt like a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I was not just a victim of their secrets, but a prisoner of their control. The question of what to do next was no longer about justice for Sarah, but about my own liberation. How could I fight a family that had already anticipated my every move, that had legally bound me to their silence? The path ahead was fraught with danger, but one thing was clear. I could not, would not, live under their thumb. The fight for my freedom, for my voice, had just begun. And I knew with a chilling certainty that it would be the fight of my life. The legal document, a cold, calculated weapon, lay between us, a testament to the Petrovs' foresight and Mark's ultimate betrayal. The silence that followed my accusation was deafening, broken only by the frantic pounding of my own heart. Mark finally looked up, his eyes hollow, devoid of the warmth I once knew. "What do you want me to say, Olivia?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "That I'm sorry? That I was a fool? That I was terrified of losing everything?" His words were a pathetic echo of the truth, but they offered no solace. The trust was irrevocably broken. The man I had married was not the man I thought he was, but a carefully constructed facade, a product of his family's insidious control. I spent the next few days in a haze of despair and rage. The apartment, once our shared space, now felt like a cage. Mark tried to talk, to apologize, to plead for understanding, but his words bounced off a wall of ice I had erected around my heart. I saw him not as my husband, but as an extension of the Petrov machine, another cog in their mechanism of deceit. The prenup was a masterstroke of manipulation designed to disarm any threat, to silence any dissent. But it also ignited a new kind of fire within me. They thought they had me trapped. They thought they had won. But they underestimated the power of a woman scorned, a woman who had nothing left to lose but her dignity. My mind, usually so creative and free-flowing, became a strategic battlefield. I couldn't fight them legally. They had covered every angle. But there were other ways to fight. Ways that didn't involve courts or lawyers. Ways that could expose their truth without costing me everything. I thought of Sarah, her haunted eyes, her stolen grief. I thought of Lily, a life erased. And I thought of myself, Olivia, the graphic designer, the storyteller, the woman who refused to be silenced. My weapon wouldn't be legal documents, it would be narrative. It would be the truth, carefully crafted and unleashed upon the world. I started by revisiting the old emails between Eleanor and the lawyer. I dismissed them as circumstantial, but now I saw them differently. They weren't just about discrete arrangements, they were about a pattern of behavior, a history of control. I cross-referenced dates, names, and events with the information Sarah had reluctantly provided. A name kept reappearing: Dr. Evelyn Reed, a renowned fertility specialist. Why would Eleanor be consulting a fertility specialist around the time of Sarah's pregnancy? It didn't make sense. Sarah was pregnant naturally. Unless... A chilling thought began to form in my mind, a dark, insidious possibility that made my blood run cold. What if the lie about Lily's death wasn't the only lie? What if the entire narrative of Sarah's pregnancy, her being sent away, the adoption, what if it was all a smokescreen for something far more sinister? The Petrovs were obsessed with reputation, with control. What if Sarah's pregnancy wasn't just an inconvenience, but an opportunity? I remembered Sarah mentioning that she was kept in a secluded home for unwed mothers, almost like a private clinic. I started searching for Dr. Evelyn Reed in any facilities associated with her. It took days of relentless digging, sifting through obscure medical journals, old news articles, and public records. Finally, I found it, a small privately owned clinic in a remote part of upstate New York, specializing in alternative family planning solutions. The clinic had been shut down years ago due to irregularities and unethical practices, but not before it had facilitated dozens of private adoptions. And the director? Dr. Evelyn Reed. My hands trembled as I pieced it together. The Petrovs hadn't just arranged for Sarah to give up her baby, they had used her. They had used her pregnancy, her vulnerability, to facilitate a private adoption for a wealthy, childless couple, likely for a substantial sum of money. And to cover their tracks, to ensure Sarah would never seek to reclaim her child, they had fabricated the story of Lily's death. It was a game-changing revelation. A twist so dark, so utterly depraved, recontextualized everything. Sarah wasn't just a victim of family pressure, she was a pawn in a black market adoption scheme, her body and her child exploited for profit and reputation. The emotional peak scene unfolded during the annual Petrov family Thanksgiving dinner. I had spent weeks preparing, not for the feast, but for the confrontation. I had meticulously gathered my evidence, copies of the legal documents, the emails, the clinic's records, and most damning of all, a letter from a woman named Catherine Hayes, who had adopted a baby girl from Dr. Reed's clinic 2 years after Sarah's supposed adoption. The letter, which I had painstakingly tracked down through an online support group for adoptees, described a baby girl born on the exact date Sarah's daughter would have been born, with striking similarities to Sarah's family features. Catherine had been searching for her daughter's birth mother for years, always hitting dead ends. Until now. The dining room was filled with the usual boisterous chatter, the clinking of glasses, the aroma of roasted turkey. Mark sat beside me, oblivious or perhaps willfully ignorant of the storm brewing. Eleanor, at the head of the table, presided over her kingdom, her smile serene, her eyes sharp. I waited for the perfect moment, after the initial pleasantries, after everyone had settled into their seats, their guard down. I cleared my throat, the sound barely audible above the din. Everyone turned to me, surprised by my sudden interjection. I have something to say, I announced, my voice trembling slightly, but firm. Something important. Eleanor's smile faltered. Mark stiffened beside me, a look of dawning horror on his face. Olivia, darling, is everything all right? Eleanor asked, her voice laced with a saccharine sweetness that made my stomach churn. No, Eleanor, I replied, meeting her gaze directly. Everything is not all right. Not for Sarah, not for Lily, and not for me. I pulled out the stack of documents, laying them on the pristine white tablecloth. The chatter died down, replaced by an uneasy silence. All eyes were on me, then on the papers. 5 years ago, I began, my voice gaining strength. Sarah Petrov, your daughter, Eleanor, gave birth to a baby girl. A baby girl you told her died. A baby girl you told everyone was adopted. But that was a lie. All of it. A gasp rippled through the room. Mark jumped up, his chair scraping against the floor. Olivia, stop! You don't know what you're doing, he pleaded, trying to grab my arm. I shook him off. I know exactly what I'm doing, Mark. I'm telling the truth. I held up Catherine Hayes' letter. This is from Catherine Hayes. She adopted a baby girl from Dr. Evelyn Reed's clinic. A baby girl born on the same day as Sarah's daughter. A baby girl named Lily. The name hung in the air, a ghost finally given form. Eleanor's face, usually so composed, crumpled. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, for a way to regain control. But there was none. The truth, once buried so deep, was now exposed, raw and undeniable. You didn't just force Sarah to give up her child, I continued, my voice rising to a crescendo. You sold her. You sold Lily to a wealthy couple, and then you lied to Sarah telling her her baby had died, so she would never come looking for her. All to protect your precious family reputation. All for profit. The accusations hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their truth. Family members gasped, whispered, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief, and dawning comprehension. Some looked at Eleanor with horror, others at Mark with accusation. Eleanor finally found her voice, a strangled cry of denial. Lies. All lies. She's trying to destroy us. She shrieked, her composure completely gone. She's a gold digger, a manipulator. But her words lacked conviction, drowned out by the sheer weight of the evidence I had presented. Mark, meanwhile, stood frozen, his face a mask of shame and despair. His transformation was complete. The man who had once been a silent accomplice, then a fearful husband, was now utterly broken. His complicity laid bare for all to see. This isn't about destroying you, Eleanor, I said, my voice calm now, filled with a quiet power. This is about justice. For Sarah, for Lily, and for every woman you've exploited in your twisted pursuit of perfection. I looked at Mark, my eyes filled with a profound sadness. And for you, Mark, you had a choice. You chose to be a part of this, and now you have to live with the consequences. The confrontation escalated into chaos. Shouts, accusations, tears. The perfect Petrov family facade shattered into a million pieces, revealing the rot beneath. I watched it all, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. I had done what I set out to do. I'd exposed their truth, but the victory felt hollow, tinged with the bitterness of what it had cost me. My marriage was over. My life as I knew it was irrevocably changed. But I was free. Free from their secrets, free from their control, free to finally breathe. This moment shattered everything I knew. If you're feeling this shock too, it helps uncover more hidden family truths. The aftermath of the Thanksgiving dinner was a maelstrom. The Petrov family, once a monolithic entity, was fractured, its members reeling from the revelations. Eleanor, stripped of her carefully constructed authority, retreated into a shell of denial and rage, lashing out at anyone who dared to question her. Mark, utterly devastated, tried to salvage what was left of his relationship with me, but the chasm was too wide, the trust too deeply broken. He confessed to knowing about the black market adoption, about the fabricated death certificate, about everything. He had been a terrified teenager coerced into silence, then a complicit adult too afraid to challenge his mother's will. His remorse was genuine, but it came too late. The man I had loved was gone, replaced by a stranger I could no longer recognize. My own transformation was profound. The timid, accommodating wife who had once juggled endless family demands was replaced by a woman forged in fire, resolute and unyielding. I had found my voice, and I would not be silenced again. The legal threats from Eleanor's lawyers continued, but they no longer held the same terror. I had the truth on my side, and the support of Catherine Hayes, who, upon hearing the full story, was determined to find her daughter's birth mother and expose the clinic's unethical practices. Together, we had a powerful story, a story that transcended personal drama and touched upon systemic injustice. The Petrovs had built their empire on secrets and lies, but now, the foundations were crumbling. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope, a sense of purpose that extended beyond my own shattered life. The fight for justice, for truth, for the countless women and children exploited by such schemes, had just begun, and I, Olivia, was ready to lead the charge. The Thanksgiving dinner had been a detonation, scattering the fragments of the Petrov family's carefully constructed reality across the polished dining room floor. In the immediate aftermath, chaos reigned. Eleanor, her face a mask of fury and humiliation, had been whisked away by a loyal cousin, her shrill accusations echoing down the hallway. Mark, utterly shattered, had tried to approach me, his hand outstretched, but I had recoiled, the chasm between us now too vast to bridge. The other family members, a mixture of shock, anger, and dawning understanding on their faces, had dispersed, their usual boisterous farewells replaced by hushed whispers and hurried exits. The silence that descended upon the apartment once they were gone was heavy, pregnant with the weight of shattered illusions. My marriage to Mark, already a fragile thing, did not survive the night. The next morning, with a quiet resolve that surprised even myself, I packed a small bag and left. There were no dramatic scenes, no shouting matches, just a profound, aching finality. Mark, slumped on the sofa, didn't try to stop me. His silence was an admission of guilt, a tacit acknowledgement that he had chosen his family's secrets over our shared future. I moved into a small, sun-drenched apartment in a different part of Brooklyn, a space that felt like a breath of fresh air after years of suffocating under the Petrov family's shadow. It was a stark, almost painful transition, but it was also liberating. For the first time in years, I felt truly, unequivocally free. The consequences for the Petrov family were swift and brutal. The story, fueled by my anonymous blog post and the corroborating evidence I had meticulously compiled, went viral. The internet, with its insatiable appetite for drama and injustice, devoured it. The prestigious law firm that had sent me the cease and desist letter found themselves defending Eleanor against a barrage of public scrutiny and eventually a class action lawsuit initiated by Catherine Hayes and other birth mothers who had been similarly exploited by Dr. Reed's clinic. The media, sensing a scandal of epic proportions, descended upon the Petrovs, tearing apart their carefully cultivated image of respectability. Eleanor, once the unshakable matriarch, became a pariah, her name synonymous with deceit and exploitation. The family businesses suffered, their reputation irrevocably tarnished. The empire built on secrets began to crumble. Mark, caught in the crossfire, faced his own reckoning. His complicity, though born of fear, was undeniable. He lost his job, his social standing, and eventually, the respect of many of his relatives who, once the full truth emerged, felt betrayed by Eleanor's actions and his silence. He tried to reach out to me several times, sending long, heartfelt emails filled with remorse and pleas for forgiveness. I read them, but I never replied. The pain was still too raw, the betrayal too deep. I knew he was suffering, and a part of me, the part that had once loved him fiercely, felt a pang of sadness. But the woman I had become understood that some wounds were too profound to heal, some trust too fundamentally broken to repair. My character growth was not about vengeance, but about self-preservation, about reclaiming my agency and my voice. My focus shifted entirely to supporting Sarah and Catherine. Sarah, emboldened by the public outcry and the legal action, slowly began to heal. She started attending therapy, confronting the trauma she had suppressed for so long. With Catherine's help, she even began to search for her daughter, Lily, not just the baby she had been told died, but the child who had been sold. The search was arduous, filled with bureaucratic hurdles and emotional setbacks, but they persevered. The legal battle against Dr. Reed's clinic and Eleanor Petrov was long and drawn out, but eventually, justice, in its own imperfect way, prevailed. The clinic was permanently shut down, its unethical practices exposed for the world to see. Eleanor faced criminal charges for fraud and child trafficking, a shocking fall from grace for the once powerful matriarch. The financial penalties were severe, and the Petrov family fortune, once vast, was significantly diminished. In a poignant twist of fate, Sarah and Catherine, through a combination of relentless legal work and a lucky break from an anonymous tip, finally found Lily. She wasn't a baby anymore, but a vibrant, intelligent young woman named Amelia, living a happy life with her adoptive parents. The reunion was not a fairy tale, but it was real. Amelia, initially confused and overwhelmed, slowly began to understand the complex tapestry of her origins. Sarah, for the first time in decades, felt a flicker of peace, a sense of closure she had never thought possible. She began to paint again, her art now infused with a newfound hope and resilience, her canvases telling stories of survival and the enduring power of truth. As for me, Olivia, I found my purpose. The blog posts that had started all evolved into a platform, a voice for those silenced by powerful families and institutions. I used my graphic design skills to create compelling visual narratives, exposing injustices, advocating for victims, and shedding light on hidden truths. I became an accidental activist, a storyteller for the voiceless. My life was no longer about catering to the demands of others, but about empowering them. The exhaustion I once felt was replaced by a vibrant energy, a sense of profound meaning. I had lost a marriage, but I had gained a mission. The ending was not a neat, Hollywood-esque happily ever after. The scars remained, the memories lingered. But there was a profound sense of emotional closure, a quiet triumph. I had faced the darkness, exposed the truth, and emerged stronger, more authentic. The Petrov family, once a symbol of impenetrable power, was now a cautionary tale, a testament to the corrosive nature of secrets and the ultimate triumph of justice. I still lie awake wondering, what would you have done when they tried to control your body? Share your truth in the comments. Subscribe for more shocking family revelations. The question echoed in the quiet of my new apartment, a constant companion. It wasn't a question of regret, but of reflection. The journey had been arduous, fraught with pain and betrayal, but it had also been a journey of self-discovery, of finding my own strength and purpose. The woman who had once felt like Cinderella, trapped in a gilded cage, was now the architect of her own destiny, a beacon of truth in a world shrouded in shadows. The fight for justice was never truly over, but I had played my part, and in doing so, I had not only freed Sarah and Lily, but I had also irrevocably freed myself. The future was uncertain, but for the first time it felt like my own, unburdened by the weight of someone else's secrets. And that, in itself, was a victory worth celebrating.